Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back with more in the Buddha's Words. Today we are starting a new chapter, and so we'll be reading the introduction. We are starting chapter 7, The Path to Liberation. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the introduction here. In this chapter, we come to the unique distinguishing feature of the Buddha's teaching, its supramundane, or world-transcending Lokuttara path to liberation. This path builds upon the transformed understanding and deepened perspective on the nature of the world that arise from our recognition of the perils and sensual pleasures, the inevitability of death, and the vicious nature of samsara, themes that we surveyed in the previous chapter. It aims to lead the practitioner to the state of liberation that lies beyond all realms of conditioned existence, to the same sorrowless and stainless bliss of Nibbana that the Buddha himself attained on the night of his enlightenment. This chapter presents texts that, after a broad overview of the Buddha's world-transcending path, the following two chapters will bring together texts that focus more finely on the training of the mind and the cultivation of wisdom, the two major branches of the world-transcending path. I begin, however, with several suttas that are intended to clarify the purpose of this path, illuminating it from different angles. Chapter 7, Section 1, Part 1, the shorter discourse to Malunkyaputta, shows that the Buddhist path is not designed to provide theoretical answers to philosophical questions. In this sutta, the monk Malunkyaputta approaches the Buddha and demands answers to 10 speculative questions, threatening to leave the Sangha if his demand is not satisfied. Scholars have debated whether Buddha refused to answer such questions because they are in principle unanswerable, or simply because they are irrelevant to a practical resolution of the problem of suffering. Two collections of suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya make it clear that the Buddha's silence had a deeper basis than mere pragmatic concerns. These suttas show that all such questions are based on an underlying assumption that existence is to be interpreted in terms of a self and a world in which the self is situated. Since these premises are invalid, no answer framed in terms of these premises can be valid, and thus the Buddha must reject the very questions themselves. However, when the Buddha had philosophical grounds for refusing to answer these questions, he also rejected them because he considered the obsession with their solutions to be irrelevant to the quest for the release from suffering. This reason is evident point of the discussion to Malunkyaputta with its well-known simile of the man shot by a poisoned arrow. Whether any of these views is true or not, the Buddha says, there is birth, there is aging, there is death, there are sorrow, lamentation, pain, dejection, and despair, the destruction of which I describe here and now. Against a picture of the samsaric background sketched at the end of the previous chapter, this statement now takes on the expanded meaning. The destruction of birth, aging, and death is not merely the end of suffering in a single lifetime, but the end of immeasurable suffering of repeated birth, aging, and death we have undergone in the countless eons of samsara. Chapter 7, Section 1, Part 2, the Greater Discourse on the Simile of the Heartwood, clarifies from a different angle the Buddha's purpose in expounding its world-transcending Dhamma. The sutta is about is about a clansman who has gone forth from the household life into homelessness, intent on reaching the end of suffering. Though earnest in purpose at the time of his ordination, once he attains some success, whether a lower achievement like gain in honor or a superior one like concentration and insight, he becomes complacent and neglects his original purpose in entering the Buddha's path. The Buddha declares that none of the stations along the way, not moral discipline, concentration, or even knowledge and vision, is the final go of the spiritual life. The go, its heartwood or essential purpose, is unshakable liberation of the mind, and he urges those who have entered the path not to be satisfied with anything less. Chapter 7, Section 1, Part 3 is a selection of suttas from the connected discourses on the path. Magga Samyutta. The suttas state that the purpose of practicing the spiritual life under the Buddha is the fading away of lust, final nibbana without clinging, the Noble Eightfold Path being the way to attain each of these aims. The Noble Eightfold Path is the classical formulation of the way to liberation, as it is already clear that the Buddha's first sermon, in which he calls the Eightfold Path the way to cessation of suffering. Chapter 7, Part 2, or Section 2, gives formal definitions of the individual path factors, but does not show completely how their practice is integrated into the life of a disciple. The detailed application will be filled out later in this chapter and in chapters 8 and 9. Chapter 7, Section 3 throws a different spotlight on the path than we are accustomed to hear in standard Buddhist rhetoric. While we are often told that the practice of the Buddhist path depends entirely on personal effort, this sutta emphasizes the importance of spiritual friendship. The Buddha declares that the spiritual friendship is not merely half the spiritual life, but the whole of it. The endeavor to obtain spiritual perfection is not purely solitary enterprise, but occurs in dependence on close personal ties. Spiritual friendship gives the practice of the Dhamma an inescapably human dimension and welds the body of Buddhist practitioners into a community united both vertically by the relationship of teacher to students and horizontally by friendships among peers leading or treading a shared path. Contrary to common assumption, the 8 path factors are not steps to be followed in sequence, one after the another. They are more appropriately described as components than as steps. Optimally, all 8 factors should be present simultaneously, each making its own distinctive contribution. Like 8 interwoven strands of a cable that give the cable maximum strength. However, until that stage is reached, it is inevitable that the factors of the path exhibit some degree of sequence in their development. The 8 factors are commonly distributed into 3 groups as follows. 1. The moral discipline group, Silakhanda, made up of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. 2. The concentration group, Samadhikanda, made up of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And 3. The wisdom group, Panakanda, made up of right view and right intention. Within the Nikayas, however, this correlation occurs only once, where it is ascribed to the nun Dhammadinna, not to the Buddha himself. It might be said that the 2 wisdom factors are placed at the beginning because a preliminary right view and sight and right intention are required at the outset of the path. Right view providing the conceptual understanding of Buddhist principles that guides the development of the other path factors. Right intention, the proper motivation and direction for the development of the path. In the Nikayas, the Buddha often expounds the practice of the path as a gradual training, Anupubhasika, that unfolds in stages from the first step to the final goal. This gradual training is a finer subdivision of the threefold division of the path into moral discipline, concentration, and wisdom. Invariably, in the suttas, the exposition of the gradual training begins with the going forth into homelessness and the adoption of the lifestyle of a bhikkhu, a Buddhist monk. This immediately calls attention to the importance of the monastic lifestyle in the Buddha's pragmatic vision. In principle, the entire practice of the Noble Eightfold Path is open to people from any mode of life, monastic or lay, and the Buddha confirms that many among this lay followers were accomplished in the Dhamma and had attained the first 3 of the 4 stages of awakening up to non-returning Anagami. Theravada commentators say that the lay followers can also attain the 4th stage arahantship but they do so either in the verge of death or after attainment immediately seek the going forth. The fact remains, however, that the household life inevitably fosters a multitude of mundane concerns and personal attachments that impede the single-hearted quest for liberation. Thus, when the Buddha set out on his own noble quest, he did so by going into homelessness, and after his enlightenment as a practical way to help others, he established the Sangha, the order of monks and nuns, for those who want to devote themselves fully to the Dhamma unhindered by the cares of household life. The gradual training occurs in two versions, a longer version in the Digha Nikaya and a middle-length version in the Majjhima Nikaya. The principal differences are: 1. The longer version has a more detailed treatment of the observances that pertain to monastic etiquette and ascetic self-restraint. 2. The longer version includes 8 types of higher knowledge, while the middle-length version has 3 types. However, as 3 types are the only ones mentioned in the Buddha's account of his own enlightenment, Chapter 2, Section 3, Part 2, there are by far the most important. The main paradigm for the longer version of the gradual training is found at DN2, the middle-length version. Here is with variance. Here, Chapter 7, Section 4 includes the whole, which embeds the training of the simile of the elephant's footprint that gives the sutta its name. Chapter 7, Section 5, an excerpt repeats the higher stages of the training as described, but includes the impressive similes not included in latter version. The sequence opens up with the appearance of a Tathagata in the world with his exposition of the Dhamma. Having heard this, the disciple acquires faith and follows the teacher into homelessness. He then undertakes the rules of discipline that promote the purification of conduct and the right livelihood of an ascetic. The next 3 steps, conduct and right livelihood of an ascetic. The next 3 steps, commitment, restraint of the sense faculties, and mindfulness and clear comprehension, internalize the process of purification and thereby bridge the transition from moral discipline to concentration. The section on the abandonment of the 5 hindrances deals with the preliminary training in concentration. The 5 hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, dullness and drowsiness, restlessness and remorse, and doubt, are the principal obstacles to meditative development, and thus they must be removed for the mind to become collected and unified. The stock passage on the gradual training treats the overcoming, provide more practical instructor for overcoming the hindrances only schematically. But the text in the Nikayas provide more practical instructions, while the Pali commentaries often even more details. The similes in the version illustrate the joyful sense of freedom that one wins by overcoming the hindrances. The next stage in the sequence describes the attainment of the jhanas, profound states of concentration in which the mind becomes fully absorbed in its object. The Buddha enumerates 4 jhanas named simply after the numerical position in the series, each more refined and elevated than its predecessor. The jhanas are always described by the same formulas, which in several suttas are augmented by similes of great beauty. Again, although wisdom rather than concentration is the critical factor in the attainment of enlightenment, the Buddha invariably includes the jhanas in the gradual training for at least 2 reasons. First, they contribute to the intrinsic perfection of the path, and the second, because the deep concentration they induce serves as a basis for the arising of insight. The Buddha calls the jhanas the footsteps of the Tathagata, and shows them to be precursors of the bliss of Nibbana that lies at the end of the training. From the 4th jhana, 3 alternative lines of further development become possible. In a number of texts outside the stock passage on the gradual training, the Buddha mentions 4 meditative states that continue the mental unification established by the jhanas. These states, described as the liberations that are peaceful and formless, are further refinements of concentration, distinguished from the jhanas by their transcendence of the subtle mental image that serves as the object in the jhanas. They are named the base of the infinity of space, the base of the infinity of consciousness, the base of nothingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. The second line of development is the acquisition of most supranormal knowledge. The Buddha frequently refers to a set of 6 types, which come to be called the 6 kinds of direct knowledge, Chala Binya. The first of these, the knowledge of the destruction of the taints, is supramundane or world transcending, and thus marks the culmination of the 3rd line of development. But the other 5 are all mundane products of the extraordinarily powerful mental concentration achieved in the 4th jhana. The supernormal powers, the divine ear, the ability to read the mind of others, the recollection of past lives, and the knowledge of passing away and rebirth of beings. The jhanas and the formless attainments by themselves do not issue an enlightenment and liberation. Though lofty and peaceful, they can only silence the defilements that sustain the round of rebirths, but cannot eradicate them. To uproot the defilements at the most fundamental level and thereby arrive at enlightenment and liberation, the meditative process must be directed to a 3rd line of development. This is the contemplation of things as they really are, which results in increasingly deeper insights into the nature of existence and culminates in the final goal, the attainment of arahantship. This line of development is the one the Buddha pursues in the passage on the gradual training. He prefaces it with the descriptions of two of the direct knowledges, the recollection of past lives and the knowledge of the passing away and rebirth of beings. The three together figured prominently in the Buddha's own enlightenment, as we saw in Chapter 2, Section 3, Part 2, and are collectively called the three true knowledges, Trivija. Although the first two are not essential to the realization of arahantship, the Buddha probably includes them here because they reveal the truly vast and profound dimensions of suffering in samsara, thereby preparing the mind for the penetration of the Four Noble Paths, by which that suffering is diagnosed and surmounted. The passage on the gradual training does not explicitly show the process of contemplation by which the meditator develops insight. The whole process is only implied by the meditation of its final fruit, called the knowledge of the destruction of the taints, asavakhyana, and the asavas, or taints, are a classification of defilements considered in their role of sustaining the forward movement of the process of birth and death. The commentaries derive the word from the root su, meaning to flow. Scholars differ as to whether the flow implied by the prefix a is inward or outward. Hence, some have rendered it as influxes or influences, others as outflows or effluents. A stock passage in the suttas indicates that the term's real significance independently of etymology, when it describes the asavas as states that defile, bring renewal of existence, give trouble, ripen in suffering, and lead to future birth, aging, and death. Thus, other translators, bypassing the literal meaning, have rendered it cankers, corruptions, or taints. The three taints mentioned in the Nikayas are respectively acronyms for craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, and ignorance. When the disciple's mind is liberated from the taints by the completion of the path of arahantship, he reviews his newly won freedom and roars his lion's roar. Birth is destroyed. The spiritual life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming back to any state of being. But that ends the introduction there. Woo! So we get a peek at what we're going to be looking at with in the Buddha's words in the next few parts. So yeah. Should be interesting. Oh, goodness. But we'll go ahead and end that episode video there. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later. Bye.